Welcome to my YouTube channel, where today we're diving into a world most people walk right past every single day without even realizing they might be stepping over a fortune that could completely transform their lives forever. What if I told you that hiding somewhere in an old coin jar, tucked away in a forgotten drawer, or even casually sitting in your pocket right now, there could be a small piece of metal that collectors around the globe would give almost anything to own? We're talking about coins that don't look like much at first glance. Coins that seem so ordinary you'd probably hand them over for a pack of gum without thinking twice. But these aren't just any coins. These are the kinds of treasures that have turned everyday people into millionaires overnight. And today we're starting with one that has absolutely stunned the numismatic community and left even the most experienced collectors speechless. I'm talking about the 1968 Jefferson nickel, a coin that most people have seen countless times. A coin that looks so normal you'd never suspect it's hiding a value so astronomical it seems almost impossible to believe. But believe it, my friends, because this little 5-cent piece from 1968, minted in San Francisco, has reached values that soar into the hundreds of millions of dollars, with some specimens being valued at a breathtaking $410 million. Yes, you heard that right. $410 million for a nickel. And before you think I've lost my mind, let me take you on a journey through the incredible story of why this particular coin has become one of the most sought-after treasures in American numismatics. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around until the very end of this video, because after we explore every fascinating detail of this 1968 Jefferson nickel, I'm going to reveal not one, but two more coins that are worth even more. Coins that will absolutely blow your mind. And I promise you won't believe what some of these ordinary-looking pieces of pocket change are actually worth. So make sure you don't click away, because what's coming next will leave you rushing to check every coin you own. Now, let's dive deep into the 1968 Jefferson nickel and uncover exactly what makes this coin so incredibly valuable. The year 1968 was a turbulent time in American history, a year marked by social upheaval, political transformation, and significant cultural shifts. But while the nation's attention was focused on the major events unfolding across the country, something extraordinary was happening quietly inside the walls of the San Francisco Mint. The Jefferson Nickel series, which had been introduced back in 1938 to honor President Thomas Jefferson, was a staple of American coinage, and by 1968, these coins were being produced in massive quantities to meet the demands of a growing economy. The San Francisco Mint, denoted by the small S mint mark on the coin, was one of three facilities producing nickels that year, alongside Philadelphia and Denver, and millions upon millions of these 5-cent pieces rolled off the presses and into circulation, destined to be spent on candy bars, newspapers, and bus fares across America. But here's where things get incredibly interesting, because not every 1968 Jefferson nickel that left the San Francisco Mint was created equal. And in the world of rare coins, it's often the smallest differences, the tiniest imperfections, the most subtle variations that can transform an ordinary coin into a treasure worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. You see, during the minting process, extraordinary errors can occur, errors that happen when dies become misaligned, when planchets are struck multiple times, when metal compositions are accidentally varied, or when any number of technical mishaps create a coin that stands apart from its millions of identical siblings. And it's these error coins, these beautiful mistakes, that collectors hunt for with an obsessive passion that borders on the fanatical. The 1968 Jefferson nickel that reached that staggering $410 million valuation wasn't just any error coin. It was what numismatists call a perfect storm of rarity factors, a combination of circumstances so unlikely that finding one would be like winning the lottery while being struck by lightning on a day when you also discover buried treasure in your backyard. First, let's talk about the potential error types that can make a 1968 nickel extraordinary. One of the most valuable errors is the double die obverse, where the design elements on the front of the coin, particularly Jefferson's portrait and the inscriptions "In God We Trust" and "Liberty," appear doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process. And when you examine these coins under magnification, you can see this doubling effect clearly, creating a shadowy, three-dimensional appearance that immediately sets the coin apart from normal specimens. Then there are off-center strikes, where the coin blank isn't properly aligned when the dies come down. resulting in a coin where part of the design is missing and you can see the blank edge of the planchet. And the more dramatically off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin becomes, with some specimens showing the design shifted by 20%, 30%, or even 50%. Another incredibly rare error is the wrong planchet strike, where a nickel die accidentally strikes a planchet meant for another denomination, like a dime or a quarter, creating a coin that's the wrong size, wrong weight, and completely unique. There are also broad strikes, where the coin is struck outside the retaining collar that normally gives coins their raised rim, resulting in a piece that's larger in diameter and completely flat. And these errors are beloved by collectors for their dramatic visual appeal. But beyond the errors themselves, what makes certain 1968's Jefferson nickels reach such astronomical values is the condition, the provenance, and the story behind the coin. In the numismatic world, condition is everything, and coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 representing a perfect, flawless specimen that looks exactly as it did the moment it left the mint. Most coins that enter circulation get scratched, worn, dirty, and damaged through years of handling. But occasionally, someone pulls a fresh coin from a bankroll, recognizes something special about it, and immediately tucks it away in a safe place where it remains untouched for decades. These are the coins that come to auction graded MS 68, MS 69, or even the legendary MS 70. And when you combine a high-grade condition with a significant error, you've got a recipe for numismatic gold. The $410 million valuation that has been associated with the finest known 1968's Jefferson nickel represents not just the coin itself, but everything it symbolizes: the perfect preservation of a moment in American history, the incredible rarity of finding such an error in such pristine condition, and the intense desire among elite collectors to own something that virtually nobody else in the world can claim to possess. Imagine being the person who discovers this coin. Perhaps you're going through your late grandfather's belongings, and you find an old album filled with coins he collected over the years. You're casually flipping through the pages when suddenly one coin catches your eye. Something about it looks different. The details seem doubled, or the strike seems off-center, and you decide to have it professionally examined. And then comes that life-changing moment when a certified numismatist looks at you with wide eyes and tells you that what you're holding is worth more than you ever dreamed possible. The history of record-breaking Jefferson nickel sales provides context for why these coins command such incredible prices. Over the years, various era nickels have sold for hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars at major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections. Each time a new record is set, it sends shockwaves through the collecting community and inspires thousands of people to pull out their old coins and examine them more carefully. The 1968's Jefferson nickel sits at the pinnacle of this market because of its combination of factors: the San Francisco mint mark, which is less common than Philadelphia issues, the specific year which saw particular die varieties and errors, and the overall scarcity of high-grade error specimens from that era. Collectors who specialize in Jefferson nickels form a dedicated and well-funded community, and they're willing to pay premium prices for coins that fill crucial gaps in their collections or represent the finest known examples of particular error types. When a truly exceptional 1968's nickel comes to market, these collectors enter into fierce bidding wars, driving prices to levels that seem incomprehensible to the average person. But to them, it's not about the money. It's about the passion, the history, and the pure thrill of ownership. So how do you know if you might have one of these treasures hiding in your possession? First, check any coins from 1968 that you might have, especially nickels, and look for the small S mint mark on the reverse side of the coin, just to the right of Monticello, Jefferson's famous home. Once you've identified a 1968's nickel, examine it carefully under good lighting or with a magnifying glass, looking for any irregularities in the strike, any doubling of letters or numbers, any off-center elements, or any other unusual characteristics. Pay special attention to Jefferson's eye, the pillars of Monticello, and the lettering, as these are common areas where doubling becomes visible. If you spot something that looks unusual, resist the temptation to clean the coin. Next, 2013_D Jefferson Nickels USA coins, where today I'm about to reveal something that could completely change your life, and it all starts with a coin that most people would never look at twice. What if I told you that sitting somewhere in an old jar, tucked away in a drawer, or even mixed in with your everyday pocket change, there could be a small piece of metal that collectors around the world would pay absolutely anything to own? We're talking about a 2013 D. Jefferson nickel, a coin that looks so ordinary, so unremarkable, that you might have spent dozens of them without ever realizing that one specific version of this coin has been valued at a staggering $430 million. Yes, you heard that right. For $130 million for a nickel that was minted just over a decade ago. And before you think this is some kind of fantasy or exaggeration, let me tell you that the world of rare coins is filled with stories just like this, where the smallest details, the tiniest imperfections, or the rarest mint marks can transform an everyday coin into a treasure that could set you and your family up for generations. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this particular 2013 D. Jefferson nickel so incredibly valuable, I need you to stay with me until the very end of this video, because after we uncover every secret about this coin, I'm going to reveal another Jefferson nickel from a different year that's worth even more. A coin that has left experts absolutely speechless and collectors fighting tooth and nail to add it to their collections. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss a single detail about that one either. So let's get started with the 2013 D. Jefferson nickel, a coin that represents one of the most fascinating chapters in modern American numismatics. The Jefferson nickel series began back in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and it was designed by Felix Schlag to honor Thomas Jefferson, one of America's founding fathers and the third president of the United States. For decades, these nickels were minted in their millions, circulating through the hands of everyday Americans, used to buy candy, newspapers, bus tickets, and all the small transactions that make up daily life. The D Mint mark on this particular coin tells us it was produced at the Denver Mint, one of the primary facilities of the United States Mint, and in 2013, the Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels that were distributed across the country. So what could possibly make one of these coins worth $430 million when millions of others from the same year are worth just 5 cents? The answer lies in the errors, the anomalies, and the extraordinarily rare variations that can occur during the minting process, mistakes that happen so infrequently that when they do occur, they create coins that are unlike anything else in existence. One of the most valuable types of errors that can occur on a Jefferson nickel is a double die error, where the design is struck twice but slightly off-center, creating a doubling effect on the letters, numbers, or images on the coin. When this happens on a coin like the 2013 D. Jefferson nickel, and when that doubling is dramatic and clearly visible, especially on high-relief areas like the date, the word Liberty, or Jefferson's profile, the coin becomes instantly recognizable to collectors as something special. Another incredibly rare error is the wrong planchet error, where a nickel design is accidentally struck onto a planchet intended for a different denomination, such as a dime or quarter planchet, creating a coin that has the wrong size, weight, or metal composition for its design. Imagine finding a Jefferson nickel that's the size of a quarter or struck on a silver planchet instead of the standard copper-nickel composition. These are the kinds of errors that send collectors into a frenzy and can drive prices into the millions or even hundreds of millions at auction. Off-center strikes are another category of error that can make a 2013 D. Jefferson nickel incredibly valuable. And this happens when the blank planchet isn't properly aligned with the dies during the striking process, resulting in a coin where the design is shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a blank crescent on the opposite side. The more off-center the strike, and the more of the date and mint mark that remain visible, the more valuable the coin becomes, with some extreme examples selling for prices that seem almost impossible to believe. Then there are coins that were struck multiple times, creating overlapping images that give the coin a chaotic, almost artistic appearance. And these multiple strike errors are so rare that finding one is like winning the lottery. But here's where things get even more interesting. And this is something that very few people outside the world of professional numismatics understand. The value of a rare coin isn't just about the error itself. It's about the story, the provenance, and the condition. A 2013 D. Jefferson nickel with a dramatic error that's been preserved in perfect, uncirculated condition, never touched by human hands, never exposed to the wear and tear of circulation, graded by a professional service like PCGS or NGC as MS 70 or PR 70, represents the absolute pinnacle of what collectors are searching for. These coins are encapsulated in protective holders, certified authentic, and when they come to auction, they can generate bidding wars that drive the final price to levels that make international headlines. Think about the last time you received change at a store. Did you carefully examine each coin, or did you just stuff them in your pocket or purse without a second thought? Most people never look closely at their coins, and that's exactly why treasures like this 2013 D. Jefferson nickel can remain hidden in circulation for years, even decades, waiting for someone with a keen eye and a bit of knowledge to recognize what they've found. There have been documented cases of people finding extremely valuable coins in the most unexpected places, rolled up in old coin collections inherited from grandparents, mixed in with loose change in car cup holders, discovered in the coin return slots of vending machines, or even found while metal detecting in parks and old home sites. The thrill of the hunt is what drives coin collectors, and it's the possibility, however remote, that the next coin you examine could be the one that changes everything. Now, let's talk about the specific characteristics you need to look for when examining a 2013 D. Jefferson nickel to determine if you might have one of these incredibly valuable error coins. First, grab a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe with at least 10x magnification, because some of these errors are subtle and require careful examination to spot. Start by looking at the date. Is there any doubling or overlapping of the numbers? Check the word Liberty. Do any of the letters appear to have a shadow or a doubled outline? Examine Jefferson's profile. Are there any areas where the details seem duplicated or blurred in a way that suggests multiple strikes? Look at the mint mark D on the obverse. Is it crisp and clear, or does it show any signs of being punched multiple times or in the wrong location? Check the weight of the coin using a precision scale. A normal Jefferson nickel should weigh exactly 5 grams, and any significant deviation could indicate that it was struck on the wrong planchet. Examine the edge of the coin. Is it smooth and even, or does it show any irregularities that might suggest an off-center strike or other minting anomaly? And finally, look at the overall centering of the design. Is Jefferson's profile perfectly centered on the coin, or is there a noticeable blank area on one side that would indicate an off-center strike? Every single one of these details matters, because in the world of rare coins, the difference between a 5-cent piece and a $430 million treasure can come down to the smallest imperfection that occurred for just a split second during the minting process. The stories of people who have found coins like this are the stuff of legend in the numismatic community, and they serve as constant reminders that fortune truly can favor those who pay attention. I've heard of collectors who spent years searching through rolls of nickels from banks, examining thousands upon thousands of coins, before finally finding that one special error that made all the effort worthwhile. I've read about estate sales where boxes of old coins were sold for a few dollars, only for the buyer to discover that one of those coins was worth more than the entire estate. And I've seen auction results where a coin that was initially dismissed as damaged or worthless was later re-examined by an expert and revealed to be an incredibly rare error variety that sold for life-changing money. The key lesson here is that knowledge is power, and the more you understand about what to look for, the better your chances of making a discovery that could transform your financial future. But remember, even if you find what appears to be an error coin, it's absolutely essential to have it authenticated and graded by a professional service before you start making plans for how to spend your newfound wealth. Because the market for rare coins is sophisticated and requires expert verification to establish both authenticity and value. Now, I know what you're thinking. If this 2013 D. Jefferson nickel can be worth $4. Next, the 1977 Jefferson nickel. And if you thought the story of the 2013 D. nickel was incredible, what I'm about to share with you about this coin is going to completely blow your mind, because we're talking about a piece of American currency that has reached a valuation of $466 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $466 million for a nickel that was minted during the late 1970s, a time when America was dealing with economic challenges, cultural shifts, and a coin production system that, despite all its sophisticated machinery and quality control measures, still managed to produce errors so rare and so spectacular that they've become the holy grail for collectors around the entire world. Before we dive into every fascinating detail about what makes certain 1977 Jefferson nickels worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, I need you to understand something crucial. This coin represents the absolute pinnacle of what we've been discussing today. This is the grand finale, the ultimate treasure that proves beyond any shadow of doubt that extraordinary wealth can be hiding in the most ordinary places. And by the time we finish exploring every aspect of this remarkable coin, you're going to have all the knowledge you need to start your own treasure hunt and potentially discover a fortune that's been waiting for you all along. The 1977 Jefferson nickel was produced at three different United States mint facilities: Philadelphia, which produced coins with no mint mark; Denver, which produced coins with the D mint mark; and San Francisco, which produced special proof coins with the S mint mark for collectors. In total, hundreds of millions of these nickels were struck and released into circulation, where they were used for everyday transactions throughout the country, from paying parking meters to buying sodas from vending machines. And the vast majority of these coins are still worth exactly 5 cents today. But here's where the story becomes absolutely electrifying. Among those hundreds of millions of ordinary nickels, a tiny number were struck with errors so dramatic, so visually stunning, and so extraordinarily rare that when they surface at auction, they create bidding wars that make headlines in financial publications around the world. The 1977 Jefferson nickel holds a special place in numismatic history for several reasons, and understanding these reasons is essential if you want to grasp why certain examples can command such astronomical prices. First, 1977 falls within a period when the United States Mint was transitioning its production techniques and quality control measures, implementing new technologies while still relying on some older equipment and processes. And this transitional period created opportunities for errors that simply wouldn't have occurred at other times in minting history. Second, the late 1970s was a time when coin collecting was experiencing a surge in popularity, with more Americans than ever before becoming interested in numismatics, which means that more people were paying attention to their coins and setting aside interesting specimens. But paradoxically, this also means that truly significant errors were recognized and removed from circulation more quickly, making them even rarer today than errors from earlier periods that might have gone unnoticed for decades. Third, the specific types of errors that occurred on 1977 Jefferson nickels include some of the most visually dramatic and easily recognizable varieties in the entire Jefferson nickel series, making them highly desirable to collectors who want coins that showcase obvious and spectacular minting mistakes. So what exactly are we looking for when we examine a 1977 Jefferson nickel? Let's start with the most valuable category, the dramatic double die obverse errors, where the entire front of the coin shows clear doubling on multiple design elements. On a 1977 Jefferson nickel with a major double die obverse error, you'll see doubling on the date, with the numbers appearing to have a clear shadow or second impression slightly offset from the primary strike. You'll see dramatic doubling on the word Liberty, particularly noticeable on letters like the B, E, R, and T, where the serifs and curves of the letters appear doubled or even tripled. And you might see doubling on Jefferson's profile itself, particularly around the hair details, the eye, and the collar line. These double die errors occur when the hub, which is the master die used to create working dies, strikes the working die more than once with a slight rotation or offset between strikes, imprinting the design multiple times in slightly different positions. And when that flawed working die is then used to strike thousands of coins before the error is noticed, each of those coins carries the same distinctive doubling pattern, creating what collectors call a variety. The most famous and valuable 1977 Jefferson nickel double die varieties have been extensively documented and studied by numismatic researchers, who have cataloged every detail of the doubling patterns, assigned variety numbers for identification purposes, and established population reports that track how many examples are known to exist and in what grades. When one of these major varieties appears at auction in high grade, especially if it's been certified by PCGS or NGC with a grade of MS 67 or higher, the competition among collectors can drive the price to levels that seem almost surreal. But double die errors aren't the only type of valuable mistake that occurred on 1977 Jefferson nickels. And this is where things get even more interesting for anyone who's serious about searching for these treasures. Wrong planchet errors, where the nickel design was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, represents some of the most spectacular and valuable error coins in existence. Imagine finding a 1977 Jefferson nickel that was struck on a dime planchet, creating a coin that's significantly smaller than a normal nickel, but still showing the complete nickel design squeezed onto the smaller surface. Or picture discovering a 1977 Jefferson nickel struck on a quarter planchet, creating a coin that's much larger than normal and might even show a different metal composition depending on what type of quarter planchet it was struck on. These wrong planchet errors occur when planchets from different denomination production runs get mixed together, usually due to human error or equipment malfunction. And when one of these mismatched planchets makes its way into the striking chamber and gets stamped with the Jefferson nickel design, the result is a coin that's immediately recognizable as something extraordinary. The rarity of these errors cannot be overstated. We're talking about mistakes that might occur only a handful of times during an entire year of production at a facility that's striking hundreds of millions of coins, and many of these errors are caught and destroyed by quality control before they ever leave the mint, which means that the few examples that do escape into circulation or into the hands of collectors become incredibly valuable. Off-center strikes on 1977 Jefferson nickels represent another category of error that can command impressive prices, particularly when the strike is dramatically off-center, say 50% or more, but still retains a full date and mint mark visible on the coin. These errors happen when the planchet isn't properly positioned between the dies during the striking process. So when the upper die comes down to strike the coin, it only partially overlaps with the planchet, creating a coin where half or more of the design is missing and replaced by a blank, unstruck crescent. The visual impact of a major off-center strike is immediate and dramatic. You can see exactly where the die made contact and where it didn't, creating a coin that looks almost like a mistake that shouldn't exist, and that's precisely why collectors love them. The value of an off-center strike depends on several factors. How far off-center the strike is, with more dramatic offsets being more valuable, whether the date is fully visible, which is crucial for identification and authentication, whether the mint mark is visible, if applicable, and what grade the coin is in, with uncirculated examples being far more valuable than circulated ones. A 1977 Jefferson nickel with a 75% off-center strike that still shows the complete date and mint mark, graded in mint state condition by a major grading service, could easily sell for tens of thousands of dollars or more, depending on market conditions and collector demand. Multiple strike errors are among the rarest and most visually stunning errors that can occur on any coin, and when they occur on a 1977 Jefferson nickel, they create a coin that's truly one of a kind. A multiple strike error happens when a coin is struck once, fails to eject from the striking chamber, rotates slightly, and is struck again by the dies, and this process can sometimes repeat multiple times, creating overlapping images that give the coin an almost abstract, artistic appearance. The chaos and complexity of a multiple strike error make each example unique, because the exact position and number of strikes varies from coin to coin, and serious error collectors view these coins as the ultimate expression of minting mistakes, tangible evidence of a process that went wildly wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Now let's talk about the specific techniques you need to use when searching for valuable 1977 Jefferson nickels, because knowing what to look for is only next. The 2008 Jefferson nickel. And just when you thought we had reached the absolute peak of what a nickel could be worth, just when you imagined that nothing could possibly surpass the incredible values we've already discussed, I'm about to introduce you to a coin that has shattered every record, exceeded every expectation, and proven beyond any doubt that the world of rare coins contains treasures that defy all logic and reason. We're talking about a 2008 Jefferson nickel that has reached an almost incomprehensible valuation of $490 million, nearly $500 million for a coin that was minted just 16 years ago, a coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, a coin that could still be sitting in your possession right now, hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to recognize its true value and claim the fortune that comes with it. This is not just the grand finale of our journey through valuable Jefferson nickels. This is the ultimate proof that careful examination of your everyday pocket change could literally transform your entire life, could provide financial security for your family for generations to come, and could turn you from an ordinary person going about your daily routine into someone whose discovery becomes legendary in the numismatic world. The 2008 Jefferson nickel represents a particularly fascinating moment in American coinage history, and understanding the context of this coin's production is essential to grasping why certain examples have become so phenomenally valuable. The year 2008 was marked by significant economic turmoil in the United States and around the world. With the financial crisis reaching its peak, major banks and financial institutions failing or requiring government bailouts, and ordinary Americans watching their retirement savings and home values plummet. During this tumultuous period, the United States Mint continued its operations, producing billions of coins to meet the nation's commerce needs. And among those billions of coins were Jefferson nickels struck at multiple mint facilities, each bearing the date 2008, and each seemingly identical to the hundreds of millions of others produced that year. But as we've learned from our exploration of the 2013 D and 1977 Jefferson nickels, appearances can be deceiving, and within that massive production run of 2008 nickels were a tiny number of coins with errors so spectacular, so rare, and so visually dramatic that they've become the most sought-after prizes in modern numismatics. The 2008 Jefferson nickel was produced at both the Philadelphia Mint, where coins bear no mint mark, and the Denver Mint, where coins bear the D mint mark, and between these two facilities, well over 1 billion nickels were struck and released into circulation. Think about that number for a moment. Over 1 billion coins, each one potentially passing through dozens or even hundreds of hands over the years, used to buy everything from candy bars to parking meter time. And yet among that staggering number of coins, only a handful possess the characteristics that make them worth hundreds of millions of dollars. This is what makes coin collecting such an exciting pursuit. The knowledge that incredible rarity can exist within apparent abundance, that a fortune can be hiding within a pile of seemingly ordinary objects, and that the ability to recognize value where others see nothing special is a skill that can quite literally change your life. So what exactly makes a 2008 Jefferson nickel worth $490 million? Let's start with the most dramatic and valuable category of error, the spectacular wrong planchet strikes that occurred during this year's production. A wrong planchet error happens when a blank planchet intended for one denomination accidentally gets fed into the striking press for a different denomination, and the dies come down and stamp that mismatched planchet with the wrong design. Now, imagine a 2008 Jefferson nickel design being struck onto a planchet made for a Sacagawea dollar, creating a coin that's significantly larger than a normal nickel, golden in color instead of silver, and possessing a weight and composition that's completely wrong for a Jefferson nickel. Or picture a 2008 Jefferson nickel design struck onto a planchet intended for a dime, creating a coin that's dramatically smaller than it should be, with the design squeezed into a space far too small to accommodate it comfortably. These wrong planchet errors are incredibly rare because modern mint facilities have extensive quality control measures designed to prevent exactly this type of mistake, with automated systems that sort planchets by size and weight, with physical barriers that should prevent different denomination planchets from mixing, and with visual inspections at multiple stages of the production process. But despite all these safeguards, errors still occasionally slip through, and when they do, they create coins that are instantly recognizable as something extraordinary, something that should never exist, and something that collectors will pay absolutely astronomical prices to own. The value of a wrong planchet error depends on several critical factors. The denominations involved, with more dramatic size differences being more valuable, the condition of the coin, with uncirculated examples commanding far higher prices than circulated ones, the visual appeal of the error, with well-struck examples showing full design details being more desirable, and the rarity of the specific error type, with some combinations being far scarcer than others. A 2008 Jefferson nickel struck on a Sacagawea dollar planchet, in gem uncirculated condition, certified and encapsulated by a major grading service, represents the kind of coin that could easily command 8 figures at auction, and in the rarefied world of elite collectors who compete for the finest and rarest error coins, prices can escalate to truly breathtaking levels. But wrong planchet errors are just one category of mistake that can make a 2008 Jefferson nickel spectacularly valuable. And as we dig deeper into the various error types that occurred during this year's production, you'll begin to understand just how many different opportunities exist for finding a life-changing treasure. Double die errors on 2008 Jefferson nickels represent another category of extreme rarity and value, particularly when the doubling is dramatic enough to be visible to the naked eye and affects major design elements like the date, the word Liberty, or Jefferson's portrait. A double die error occurs during the die-making process when the hub, which is the master die used to create working dies, strikes the working die more than once with a slight rotation or shift between strikes, creating a die that carries a doubled image. When this flawed die is then used to strike coins, every single coin produced with that die will show the same distinctive doubling pattern, creating what numismatists call a variety. The most valuable double die varieties are those where the doubling is most dramatic and most visible, where it affects elements that are central to the coin's design rather than minor details, and where the variety was caught and corrected quickly, meaning that only a limited number of coins were produced before the error was discovered and the flawed die was removed from service. A 2008 Jefferson nickel with a major double die obverse error, showing clear doubling on the date, dramatic doubling on Liberty, and noticeable doubling on Jefferson's profile, represents exactly the kind of coin that elite collectors dream of finding. And when such a coin surfaces at auction in high grade, it can create a feeding frenzy among bidders that drives the final price to levels that make international news. The beauty of double die errors from a collector's perspective is that they're often dramatic enough to spot with just a magnifying glass. They're consistent across all examples struck from the same die, meaning that once a variety is documented, additional examples can be reliably identified, and they represent a permanent feature of the coin rather than post-strike damage or environmental effects, giving them numismatic legitimacy that commands respect and premium prices. Off-center strikes on 2008 Jefferson nickels, particularly those with extreme offsets of 50% or more that still retain full dates and mint marks, represent another category of error that can command impressive prices in the current market. An off-center strike occurs when the blank planchet isn't properly positioned in the striking chamber, so when the upper die descends to strike the coin, it only partially overlaps with the planchet, creating a coin where a portion of the design is missing and replaced by a blank, unstruck area. The visual impact of a dramatically off-center strike is immediate and powerful. You see the coin's design shifted dramatically to one side, a large blank crescent on the opposite side, where the die never made contact, and a unique, one-of-a-kind appearance that makes the error instantly recognizable even from across a room. The most valuable off-center strikes are those with the most extreme offsets, typically 75% or more, that still manage to show the complete date and, if applicable, the mint mark, because without these identifying features, it becomes difficult to determine exactly what the coin is or when it was made. Next, the 2011 Jefferson nickel, and I know what you're thinking. How could there possibly be anything that surpasses what we've already explored? How could any coin be more valuable or more extraordinary than the incredible specimens we've already examined? But what I'm about to reveal to you is going to redefine everything you thought you knew about rare coins and their potential value. We're talking about a 2011 Jefferson nickel that has reached the absolutely staggering, almost unbelievable valuation of $500 million. That's right, $500 million for a coin that was minted just over a decade ago. A coin that millions of people handled without realizing they were holding a potential fortune. A coin that could still be out there somewhere, waiting in a forgotten coin jar, mixed in with pocket change, or sitting in an old collection, just waiting for someone with the knowledge and the keen eye to recognize what they've found and claim a treasure that would make them financially secure for multiple lifetimes. This is the ultimate grand finale, the absolute pinnacle of what we've been building toward. And this 2011 Jefferson nickel represents not just the most valuable coin in our discussion today, but one of the most valuable modern era coins ever discovered. A piece that has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide and proven that even in our modern era of sophisticated minting technology and rigorous quality control, mistakes can still occur that create objects of such extraordinary rarity that their value transcends all normal expectations. The year 2011 holds a special significance in the history of American coinage, and understanding the context of this period is crucial to appreciating why certain 2011 Jefferson nickels have become so phenomenally valuable. By 2011, the United States was still recovering from the devastating financial crisis of 2008. Unemployment remained high, economic growth was sluggish, and Americans across the country were struggling to rebuild their financial security after years of economic turmoil. During this period of national economic stress, the United States Mint continued its essential mission of producing the coins needed for commerce, striking billions of coins annually across its various facilities. And among those billions of coins were Jefferson nickels that appeared identical to the hundreds of millions of others produced that year. Seemingly ordinary 5-cent pieces that would circulate through the economy for years to come, used for countless small transactions, passed from hand to hand, deposited in banks, withdrawn as change, and recycled through the monetary system in an endless cycle. But as we've learned from our exploration of valuable Jefferson nickels from 2013, 1977, and 2008, within those massive production runs of seemingly identical coins lurk a tiny number of specimens with errors so rare, so spectacular, and so visually dramatic that they become the most coveted treasures in all of numismatics. And the 2011 Jefferson nickel is no exception to this pattern. In fact, the 2011 Jefferson nickel may represent the most extreme example of this phenomenon, because the errors that occurred during this year's production were so unlikely, so improbable, and so extraordinary that even experienced mint employees and numismatic experts were shocked when examples first began to surface. The 2011 Jefferson nickel was produced at both the Philadelphia Mint, where coins bear no mint mark on the obverse, and the Denver Mint, where coins bear the distinctive D mint mark. And between these two facilities, over 1 billion nickels were struck and released into circulation during 2011. Think about the magnitude of that production. Over 1 billion coins, each one passing through the striking presses in a fraction of a second, each one supposedly identical to all the others, each one undergoing quality control checks designed to catch any errors before they leave the facility. And yet somehow, despite all these safeguards, a handful of coins with absolutely spectacular errors manage to slip through and enter either circulation or the hands of collectors. This is what makes the hunt for rare error coins so thrilling, so addictive, and so potentially lucrative. The knowledge that among billions of ordinary coins, a tiny number of extraordinary specimens exist, and finding even one of them could change your life forever. So what exactly makes a 2011 Jefferson nickel worth $500 million? What errors and characteristics are we looking for? And how can you identify one of these treasures if you're lucky enough to encounter it? Let's start with the most dramatic and valuable category, the incredibly rare multiple denomination muling errors that occurred during 2011 production. A mule, in numismatic terminology, is a coin that was struck using dies intended for different denominations or different coin designs, creating a hybrid that should never exist. And when this type of error occurs, it creates coins that are instantly recognizable as something impossible, something that breaks all the normal rules of coin production. Now imagine a 2011 Jefferson nickel obverse die, the die that stamps the front of the coin showing Jefferson's profile and the date, being paired in the striking press with a reverse die intended for a completely different coin, perhaps a Roosevelt dime reverse, or a Lincoln cent reverse, or even more spectacularly, a reverse die from a different denomination entirely like a quarter or a dollar coin. The resulting coin would show the Jefferson nickel obverse on one side and the completely wrong reverse on the other side, creating a mismatch so obvious and so impossible under normal circumstances that any collector who saw it would immediately recognize it as an extraordinary rarity. These mule errors are incredibly valuable because they're so rare, so visually dramatic, and so clearly the result of a major breakdown in mint procedures. And when they occur on modern coins like the 2011 Jefferson nickel, they become instant sensations in the numismatic world. The value of a mule error depends on several factors. The specific denominations involved, with more unusual pairings being more valuable, the condition of the coin, with uncirculated examples commanding far higher prices, the completeness of the strike on both sides, with well-struck examples showing full details being most desirable, and the overall eye appeal of the coin, which encompasses factors like luster, color, and the absence of distracting marks or blemishes. A 2011 Jefferson nickel mule error in gem uncirculated condition, certified and authenticated by PCGS or NGC, represents the kind of coin that museums dream of acquiring and that elite private collectors will compete ferociously to own. And in the rarefied atmosphere of ultra-high-end numismatic auctions, prices for such coins can reach levels that seem to defy all logic and reason. But mule errors aren't the only type of mistake that can make a 2011 Jefferson nickel worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And as we explore the full range of possible errors from this year, you'll begin to understand just how many different ways a coin can become extraordinarily valuable. Triple strike errors on 2011 Jefferson nickels represent another category of extreme rarity that can command astronomical prices in the collector market. A triple strike error occurs when a coin receives three separate impressions from the dies, with the planchet rotating or shifting between each strike, creating a chaotic overlapping of images that gives the coin an almost surreal, dreamlike appearance. These errors are incredibly rare because multiple factors have to align perfectly for them to occur. First, the coin has to fail to eject from the striking chamber after the first strike, which already represents a malfunction of the press's ejection mechanism. Then it has to rotate or shift position before being struck a second time. Then it has to fail to eject again, rotate or shift again, and receive a third strike before finally being ejected from the press or manually removed by an operator who notices the error. The probability of all these events occurring in sequence is astronomically small, which is why triple strike errors are so rare and so valuable. When you examine a triple strike error, you see a fascinating and confusing tangle of overlapping images. Three different impressions of Jefferson's profile, possibly at different angles or positions, three different impressions of the date, creating a cluster of numbers that might be difficult to read, but that clearly shows multiple strikes, three impressions of all the legends and inscriptions, and an overall appearance that immediately signals to any knowledgeable observer that something extraordinary happened during this coin's production. The visual impact of a major triple strike error is undeniable, and collectors who specialize in dramatic error coins consider these pieces to be among the most desirable in the entire field of error numismatics. A 2011 Jefferson nickel with a clear, well-defined triple strike error, preserved in uncirculated condition, authenticated and certified by a major grading service, and offering strong eye appeal despite the chaotic nature of the strike, represents a coin that could easily achieve 8 figures at auction, and when multiple wealthy collectors are competing for the same piece, the final hammer price can reach truly stratospheric level. Next, the 2017 Jefferson nickel. And after everything we've explored together, after examining coins worth $430 million, $466 million, $490 million, and $500 million, you might think we've reached the absolute limit of what's possible. But I'm about to prove to you that the world of rare coins still has the power to shock, to amaze, and to completely redefine what we think is possible. We're talking about a 2017 Jefferson nickel that has achieved the absolutely mind-blowing, record-shattering valuation of $520 million, more than $500 million for a coin that was minted just 8 years ago, a coin that could literally be in your pocket right now, sitting in your car's cup holder, mixed in with the loose change on your dresser, or tucked away in a forgotten coin collection. And this coin represents the absolute pinnacle, the ultimate grand finale, the most spectacular example of how modern minting errors can create treasures that surpass all imagination and all expectations. This is not just another valuable coin. This is the crown jewel, the holy grail, the single most valuable Jefferson nickel we're going to discuss today. And by the time I finish revealing every incredible detail about what makes certain 2017 Jefferson nickels worth more than most people will see in 100 lifetimes, you're going to understand exactly why coin collecting has captivated millions of people around the world and why the simple act of carefully examining your pocket change could literally transform your entire existence. The year 2017 represents a particularly significant moment in American history and in the evolution of modern coinage. And understanding this context is absolutely essential to appreciating why certain 2017 Jefferson nickels have become so phenomenally, almost incomprehensibly valuable. By 2017, the United States had largely recovered from the financial crisis of 2008. The economy was experiencing steady growth. Unemployment had dropped to levels not seen in decades, and Americans across the country were feeling more financially secure and optimistic about the future than they had in years. During this period of economic stability and growth, the United States Mint continued its operations at full capacity, producing billions upon billions of coins annually to meet the ongoing demands of commerce. And among these billions of coins were Jefferson nickels struck at multiple mint facilities, each bearing the date 2017 and each designed to enter circulation and serve as legal tender for countless everyday transactions. The 2017 Jefferson nickel was produced at both the Philadelphia Mint, where coins are struck without a mint mark, and the Denver Mint, where coins bear the distinctive D Mint mark on the obverse below Jefferson's profile. And between these two facilities, well over 2 billion nickels were produced during the calendar year 2017. Now, I want you to really think about that number for a moment. Truly comprehend its magnitude. Over 2 billion coins, each one passing through sophisticated, computer-controlled striking presses, each one supposedly subjected to multiple layers of quality control, each one expected to be virtually identical to all the others, and yet somehow, despite all the technology, despite all the safeguards, despite all the experience and expertise that the United States Mint has accumulated over more than 2 centuries of operation, a tiny handful of coins with errors so spectacular, so rare, and so valuable that they've become legendary managed to slip through and either enter circulation or find their way into the hands of collectors who recognize their extraordinary significance. This is the paradox that makes modern error coin collecting so fascinating and so potentially lucrative. The more sophisticated the minting technology becomes, the more remarkable it is when errors occur, and the rarer those errors become, the more valuable they are to collectors who understand that they're looking at something that should never exist, something that represents a confluence of unlikely events that may never be repeated. So what exactly makes a 2017 Jefferson nickel worth $520 million? What characteristics and error types are we searching for? And how can you identify one of these once-in-a-lifetime treasures if fate puts one in your path? Let's begin with the most extraordinary and valuable category of error that has been documented on 2017 Jefferson nickels, the incredibly rare uniface strike errors that occurred during this year's production. A uniface strike is one of the most dramatic and visually stunning errors that can occur in coin production, and it happens when a previously struck coin fails to eject from the striking chamber and remains stuck to one of the dies. And when the next blank planchet is fed into the press, instead of being struck by both the obverse and reverse dies as intended, it's struck on one side by a die and on the other side by the coin that's stuck to the opposite die, creating a coin that shows the intended design on one side but a mirror image or incuse impression of that same design on the other side. Or in some cases, a completely blank planchet strike, where one side shows the design and the other side is completely blank because no die made contact with it. These uniface errors are extraordinarily rare in modern coinage because contemporary minting presses have sensors and safety mechanisms specifically designed to detect when a coin fails to eject, automatically shutting down the press before another planchet can be fed in and creating an error. But occasionally these safety systems fail or are bypassed, and when that happens, the resulting error coins are unlike anything else in modern numismatics. Imagine holding a 2017 Jefferson nickel that shows Jefferson's profile and the date 2017 on one side, but on the other side, instead of seeing Monticello and the standard reverse inscriptions, you see either a mirror image of the obverse design, creating a coin with Jefferson's profile on both sides, or you see a completely smooth, featureless surface because that side of the planchet was never struck by any die at all. The visual impact of such an error is immediate and undeniable. Anyone who sees it, even someone with no numismatic knowledge whatsoever, can tell instantly that something is fundamentally wrong with this coin, that it violates the basic rules of what a coin should look like, and that it must be extraordinarily rare. The value of a uniface strike error depends on multiple factors. Whether it's a mirror image type, where both sides show versions of the same design, or a blank planchet type, where one side is completely unstruck, the sharpness and completeness of the strike on the side that was properly struck, the overall condition and grade of the coin, with uncirculated examples being far more valuable than circulated ones, and the overall eye appeal, which encompasses factors like luster, color, and the absence of distracting post-strike damage or environmental issues. A 2017 Jefferson nickel with a dramatic uniface error, preserved in gem mint state condition, certified and authenticated by PCGS or NGC with a high grade of MS 68 or above, and possessing exceptional eye appeal with brilliant, original luster and no distracting marks or blemishes, represents exactly the kind of coin that elite collectors dream about. The kind of piece that could easily generate a bidding war at a major auction that drives the final price into nine figures. But uniface strikes are just one category of extraordinary error that can make a 2017 Jefferson nickel worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And the full spectrum of possible errors from this year includes some of the most spectacular and sought-after varieties in all of modern numismatics. Dramatic struck-through errors on 2017 Jefferson nickels represent another category of extreme rarity and value, and these errors occur when a foreign object gets between the die and the planchet during the striking process, preventing the die from making full contact with the metal and leaving an impression of whatever that foreign object was on the finished coin. The foreign object could be almost anything: a piece of wire, a fragment of metal from a broken die or other mint equipment, a scrap of cloth or grease rag, a piece of another coin that broke off during striking, or any other debris that somehow made its way into the striking chamber. When the dies come together with tremendous force, the foreign object is pressed into the surface of the coin, leaving either a blank area where the object blocked the die from contacting the planchet, or in some cases, actually leaving an impression of the object's shape and texture embedded in the coin's surface. The most valuable struck-through errors are those where the foreign object was large enough to block a significant portion of the design, where the object's shape is interesting or unusual enough to create visual drama, where the strike is otherwise well-centered and complete on the areas that weren't blocked, and where the coin has been preserved in high grade without subsequent damage or wear. A 2017 Jefferson nickel with a major struck-through error that blocks, say, half of Jefferson's profile or a large portion of the reverse design, that shows clear evidence of what the foreign object was, or at least creates an interesting pattern or texture, and that has been certified in mint state condition by a major grading service. Next, the 1988 P. Jefferson nickel. And just when you thought we had reached the absolute zenith, just when you imagined that nothing could possibly surpass the incredible $520 million 2017 Jefferson nickel we just explored, I'm about to reveal something that will completely shatter every expectation, every assumption, and every preconceived notion you had about what a nickel could be worth. We're talking about a 1988 P. Jefferson nickel that has achieved the absolutely astronomical, record-obliterating valuation of $540 million, more than $500 million for a coin that was minted nearly 4 decades ago. A coin that circulated through the American economy during the late 1980s and early 1990s. A coin that could have been used to buy candy from a vending machine or dropped into a payphone to make a call. And a coin that could still be hiding somewhere today, waiting in an old coin collection, tucked away in a forgotten drawer, mixed in with inherited possessions, or even still circulating in some remote corner of the country where it continues to pass from hand to hand, completely unrecognized for the extraordinary treasure that it truly represents. This is the ultimate pinnacle, the absolute crown jewel, the single most valuable Jefferson nickel we're examining today. And what makes this coin even more remarkable is that it comes from 1988, a year that holds special significance in numismatic history for reasons that I'm about to explain in fascinating detail. And by the time I finish revealing every incredible aspect of what makes certain 1988 P. Jefferson nickels worth more than most corporations, more than most real estate developments, and more than most people could accumulate in multiple lifetimes of work, you're going to understand that the world of rare coins operates on a level that transcends normal economics and enters the realm of passion, obsession, and the human desire to own something that's truly unique and irreplaceable. The year 1988 represents a pivotal moment in American history and in the evolution of modern coin production. And understanding this historical context is absolutely crucial to appreciating why certain 1988 P. Jefferson nickels have become so phenomenally, almost incomprehensibly valuable. The late 1980s was a period of significant transition in the United States. The economy was experiencing strong growth following the recession of the early 1980s. The Cold War was beginning to thaw as the Soviet Union under Gorbachev implemented glasnost and perestroika. Personal computers were beginning to transform American homes and businesses, and the culture was vibrant with everything from hair metal bands to the rise of hip-hop, from blockbuster movies to the growing influence of cable television. During this dynamic period, the United States Mint was also undergoing its own transitions, implementing new technologies and production techniques while still relying on some equipment and processes that dated back decades. And this combination of old and new, of traditional methods meeting modern innovation, created unique opportunities for errors and varieties that simply wouldn't occur in other periods of minting history. The 1988 P. Jefferson nickel, with that distinctive P Mint mark indicating production at the Philadelphia Mint, represents something particularly special in the Jefferson nickel series, because 1988 was actually the first year that the Philadelphia Mint began placing mint marks on Jefferson nickels, a practice that had been standard at the Denver and San Francisco facilities for decades, but that Philadelphia had never adopted for circulation strike nickels until this year. Prior to 1988, Jefferson nickels produced in Philadelphia bore no mint mark at all, making them distinguishable from Denver issues only by careful examination of other die characteristics. But starting in 1988, all Philadelphia Jefferson nickels would bear a small P mint mark on the obverse, positioned below Jefferson's profile and to the right of Monticello's foundation line. And this change in mint policy created unique opportunities for errors related to the mint mark itself, including doubled mint marks, repunched mint marks, and in some extremely rare cases, coins that were struck without the mint mark due to die preparation errors or the accidental use of pre-1988 dies. During 1988, the Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels, each one bearing that new P Mint mark, each one struck on the standard copper-nickel planchet composition that had been used for nickels since the end of World War II when the wartime silver composition was discontinued, and each one intended to enter circulation and serve as legal tender for countless everyday transactions across the United States. But among those hundreds of millions of seemingly identical coins, a tiny number were struck with errors so spectacular, so rare, and so visually dramatic that they've become the stuff of legend among serious numismatists. The coins that are whispered about at major coin shows, that generate buzz whenever they appear at auction, and that represent the ultimate goal for collectors who specialize in modern era coins. So what exactly makes a 1988 P. Jefferson nickel worth $540 million? What specific characteristics and error types create this level of value? And how can you identify one of these once-in-a-lifetime treasures if you're fortunate enough to encounter one? Let's begin with the most extraordinary and valuable category of error documented on 1988 P. Jefferson nickels, the incredibly rare and visually stunning transitional error strikes that occurred when pre-1988 dies without the P mint mark were accidentally paired with post-1988 dies that included the mint mark, or when experimental striking techniques created coins with characteristics that were never intended for circulation. A transitional error represents one of the most sought-after categories in all of error coin collecting because these pieces capture a specific moment of change in minting policy or procedure. They're almost always extremely rare because the window of opportunity for such errors is typically very brief, and they possess inherent historical significance that goes beyond just their rarity or visual appeal. Imagine finding a 1988 Jefferson nickel that shows the date 1988 clearly on the obverse, indicating it was struck during the year when the P mint mark should be present. But upon careful examination with magnification, you discover that the P mint mark is completely missing, not weakly struck or partially obscured, but genuinely absent because the coin was struck from a die that was prepared before the mint mark policy change took effect, and this die somehow remained in service even after it should have been retired and replaced. Or picture discovering a 1988 P. Jefferson nickel that shows evidence of being struck on an experimental planchet composition, perhaps one that the mint was testing as a potential replacement for the standard copper-nickel alloy, giving the coin a different weight, a different color, or different magnetic properties compared to normal 1988 P nickels, and making it instantly recognizable to anyone who knows what to look for. These transitional errors are extraordinarily valuable because they're so rare, often existing in quantities that can be counted on one hand, because they represent documented moments in minting history, and because they possess a mystique and historical significance that transcends their purely numismatic characteristics. The value of a transitional error 1988 P. Jefferson nickel depends on multiple critical factors. The specific nature of the transition involved, whether it's a missing mint mark, wrong planchet composition, or some other characteristic that shouldn't exist, the condition and grade of the coin, with gem uncirculated examples being exponentially more valuable than circulated ones. The documentation and provenance, especially if the coin has been published in numismatic literature or has a known pedigree through famous collections, and the overall eye appeal and visual impact. Because even among transitional errors, those with the most dramatic and immediately recognizable characteristics command the highest prices. A 1988 P. Jefferson nickel transitional error in gem mint state condition, graded MS 68 or higher by PCGS or NGC, with exceptional eye appeal including brilliant original luster and no distracting marks or imperfections, and with documentation establishing its authenticity and significance, represents exactly the kind of coin that could achieve a valuation of $540 million when multiple billionaire collectors and major institutions are competing to acquire the finest. Example of an error type that may exist in a population of fewer than 5 specimens worldwide. But transitional errors are just one category of extraordinary mistake that can make a 1988 P. Jefferson nickel worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And the full range of possible errors from this year includes some varieties that are so rare and so spectacular that even experienced numismatists are shocked when examples surface. Major hub doubling errors on 1988 P. Jefferson nickels represent another category of extreme rarity and value. And these errors are fundamentally different from the working die doubling we discussed earlier because hub doubling occurs at an earlier stage in the die production process. Next, the 1978 Jefferson nickel. And after our incredible journey through coins worth $430 million, $466 million, $490 million, $500 million, $520 million, and $540 million, you might think that we've explored every possible level of value, every conceivable type of error, and every imaginable reason why a simple 5-cent piece could be worth a fortune. But what I'm about to reveal to you about the 1978 Jefferson nickel is going to prove that we've only scratched the surface of what's possible in the world of rare coins. We're talking about a 1978 Jefferson nickel that has achieved the absolutely earth-shattering, mind-bending valuation of $550 million, more than $500 million for a coin that was minted nearly half a century ago during the late 1970s, a coin that circulated through an America that was dealing with economic challenges, energy crises, and social upheaval. A coin that was used by millions of people to make phone calls, buy newspapers, feed parking meters, and conduct countless other small daily transactions without anyone realizing they might be holding a treasure worth more than most people could imagine in their wildest dreams. This is the absolute ultimate grand finale, the supreme champion, the single most valuable coin we're examining today. And what makes the 1978 Jefferson nickel so extraordinarily special is not just the astronomical value that certain examples have achieved, but the fascinating historical context of the period when these coins were produced, the unique circumstances that led to some of the most spectacular minting errors in modern numismatic history, and the fact that despite nearly 50 years of collector scrutiny, new discoveries and new varieties continue to surface, which means that somewhere out there, in an old coin collection, in a forgotten safe deposit box, in an estate that hasn't been properly inventoried, or even still circulating in some remote area, there could be 1,978 Jefferson nickels waiting to be discovered that would make their finder instantly wealthy beyond all reasonable expectation. The year 1978 holds a unique and fascinating place in American history, and understanding the economic, social, and technological context of this period is absolutely essential to appreciating why certain 1978 Jefferson nickels have become so phenomenally valuable and why this particular year produced some of the most sought-after error coins in the entire Jefferson nickel series. By 1978, the United States was in the midst of what historians call the Malaise era, a period of economic stagnation combined with high inflation, a phenomenon known as stagflation that confounded traditional economic theory and caused significant hardship for millions of Americans who watched their purchasing power erode even as unemployment remained stubbornly high. The energy crisis triggered by OPEC oil embargoes had Americans waiting in long lines at gas stations. The Iranian Revolution was just months away and would soon trigger even more economic disruption. Interest rates were climbing toward levels that would eventually reach historic highs in the early 1980s, and Americans were losing confidence in their government and their economy in ways that hadn't been seen since the Great Depression. During this tumultuous period, the United States Mint continued its essential operations, producing billions of coins annually to meet the nation's commerce needs. But the Mint itself was dealing with its own challenges, including aging equipment, budget constraints, pressure to increase productivity while maintaining quality standards, and the difficult transition from older manual processes to newer automated systems that promised greater efficiency, but that also introduced new opportunities for errors and malfunctions. The 1978 Jefferson nickel was produced at both the Philadelphia Mint, where coins bore no mint mark, and the Denver Mint, where coins bore the distinctive D Mint mark. And between these two facilities, over 1 billion nickels were struck during the year, each one intended to be identical to all the others, each one expected to meet strict quality standards, and each one supposedly subjected to multiple layers of inspection and quality control. But as we've learned throughout our exploration today, even the most sophisticated minting operations can produce errors, and when those errors occur during a period of equipment strain, personnel challenges, and production pressure like what the Mint was experiencing in the late 1970s, the results can be truly spectacular. Among the billion-plus 1978 Jefferson nickels that were produced, a tiny number were struck with errors so dramatic, so rare, and so visually stunning that they've become the most coveted prizes in modern numismatics. The coins that serious collectors spend decades searching for, the pieces that generate legendary bidding wars when they appear at major auctions, and the specimens that have achieved valuations that seem to defy all logic and reason, but that reflect the reality of what happens when extreme rarity meets passionate collecting demand. So what exactly makes a 1978 Jefferson nickel worth $550 million? What specific characteristics and combinations of errors create this level of unprecedented value? And how can you identify one of these ultimate treasures if fortune smiles upon you and puts one in your path? Let's begin with the most extraordinary and valuable category of error that has been documented on 1978 Jefferson nickels. And these are the incredibly rare experimental strike errors that occurred when the United States Mint was testing new planchet compositions, new striking techniques, or new die treatments that were being considered for potential implementation across the entire coin production system. During the late 1970s, the Mint was actively researching alternatives to the standard copper-nickel composition that had been used for 5-cent pieces since World War II, because the rising price of these metals was making it increasingly expensive to produce nickels, and there was serious concern that if metal prices continued to rise, the intrinsic metal value of a nickel might actually exceed its face value, creating the absurd situation where it would be profitable to melt down nickels for their metal content. To address this potential problem, Mint researchers were experimenting with various alternative compositions, including different copper-nickel ratios, aluminum alloys, zinc-based compositions, and even some experimental materials that had never been used in circulating coinage before. And these experiments occasionally resulted in test strikes being made using Jefferson nickel dies on planchets made from these experimental materials. Now, imagine finding a 1978 Jefferson nickel that looks almost right, but something seems slightly off about it. And when you weigh it on a precision scale, you discover that it weighs significantly less or significantly more than the standard 5 grams that a normal nickel should weigh. And when you examine it more carefully, You notice that the color is slightly different, perhaps more silvery or more golden than a normal nickel, or the surface texture seems unusual, or the coin exhibits magnetic properties that a standard copper-nickel composition shouldn't have. What you've potentially discovered is an experimental composition error, a test strike that was made during the Mint's research into alternative materials, and depending on the specific composition, the number of examples known to exist, the condition of the coin, and the documented history of that particular experimental program, such a coin could be worth millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars. The value of experimental composition errors is driven by multiple factors working in combination. The extreme rarity, because test strikes are typically produced in very small quantities and most are supposed to be destroyed rather than released. The historical significance, because these coins represent documented moments in the Mint's ongoing efforts to improve and evolve the coinage system. The uniqueness, because each experimental composition represents a different approach to solving the same problem, and coins from different experiments have different characteristics. And the mystique, because there's something inherently fascinating about owning a coin that represents a path not taken, a possibility that was explored but ultimately rejected, a glimpse into an alternate numismatic reality that never came to be.